of life, let's just say.
Good morning, guys. Yeah, very.
Wonderful. Thanks for the invite, Paul. It's great to see you again. And thank you, Dr. Trin.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Paul. You summed that up, or I should say you teed that up pretty nicely. I think, as they say in Ireland, the big bump in the road is always known when you see the donkey's ear sticking out of it. And in my situation, it was just about that, very large pothole. But yeah, being serious, yes, I certainly did have a charmed life, one as an immigrant, where I could say that I was able to celebrate the success of finding my version of the American dream, which is, it's a touted phrase by many, but also understood by those of us, you know, who come here with dreams and big wide eyes. And as they also say in the world of country music, it happened overnight after 20 years. So that was the other life. It was real estate based, one where there was no cap on a person's earnings. Neither were there any caps on the amount of hours required. But I was extremely fortunate to get into real estate at a very opportune time. And as they say, one thing led to another. And there was a shingle hanging outside a beautiful office in Laguna Beach that carried my name, which all the boys at home in Ireland, especially the ones in the pub, you know, gave me a good ribbing about. And that was really where things got to after 20 years in this beautiful country.
Mm. Mhm.
Very easy answer. The answer is that I had been familiar with Africa, most specifically East Africa, for about 5 years. And it was during the course of my real estate career, having been a former educator, a school teacher to be exact, from Ireland, always valued greatly education. And given an opportunity as far back as 2005, I had helped raise funds for 4 schools in Uganda. And not really knowing where it was even on the map, just believed that it was the right thing to do, had the opportunity to do it. Back then I had the means to do it. And by 2008, I didn't quite have much of a career. The office was empty. As you said, I had gone through a divorce. And I
2008 happened.
Sure. I mean, everybody has their own version, because I think that at that time, most people were affected in some way. It just happened that an invitation came at the right time for me in mid to late 2008, giving me the opportunity to go to Uganda and see firsthand how much of a difference the schools actually made. And for the first time in my life, there was nothing in the diary, and off I went. No, I think I'd have to be totally honest and say I was running really hard away from just the catastrophic events that had taken place, and thinking, well, Africa might be a good place to hide. People mightn't be able to find me quite as easly on a cell phone or anything of the like. So I began that adventure.
So those catastrophic events were a breakup of a marriage along with the housing crisis. Was that kind of combined?
Yeah, both of them came about the same time, which, one of them on their own would have been bad enough, but for both to arrive at the same time, I think the memo from God was very clear. You needed an extra special dose to get your attention. And so God definitely got my attention in the middle to the late part of 2008. Well, my best answer is that over the years, I think I've managed to get pretty honest with myself, which, I think is a really good baseline. And there wasn't a lot of God in my life for the 20 years that I was building my success. Educated in Ireland, born and brought up Catholic, baptized, confirmed, taught by the nuns. Yeah, we have that in common for sure. And I suppose it was a case of maybe being a little bit oversaturated with all of the must-dos. So when I left Ireland in '86, packed everything I owned in about 1.5 suitcases, and my Catholic faith wasn't in either of those suitcases. Because, to be totally honest with you, at that point, I had most likely stepped away from it. And in the course of 20 years in America, I believe my life was very ego-driven. Seeing all the stars in my eyes, thinking that, all I had to do really here was to just show up, work hard, be determined, be the stubborn Irishman that I was, and knew that I would be able to do whatever was necessary to gain my slice of the American dream. And that was the fuel that, took me down the road for 20 years. And, I would say that I never had, any falling out with God. It was just that I pushed him so far into the background that he didn't have any relevance, in my day-to-day life. And I always like to mention that everything was there. The invitations were there. I'm sure the whisperings were there, but I was just really too busy and too absorbed in my own success to find it. There wasn't. Just Yeah, I guess there's something that is referred to as the immigrant mind. And Dr. Trin would be very familiar with this because I think it's something that we just innately have when we come to
Right.
America, where we believe that success is available to us. And the immigrant mind just really focuses its attention on the end result and
Yeah.
what happens, from the start to that end result, becomes a fast blur of determination and, looking around and seeing other people succeeding. And, I would say now, of course, chasing false idols, with the delusional belief that there's something there that is truly of value. I do just want to make one little look back over my shoulder for a second, because there was an interesting sign, a big road sign actually, that I came across that I guess I completely missed, but it merits mention. And that would have been back in 1986, during the first year here in America. I was working in Texas, and I happened to be in a little small house where I was working one evening around supper time, and I was looking at a black and white TV, and there was an image on it of a man at a podium. And I wasn't paying a lot of attention, but as the conversation from this individual went on, I just started to pay more and more attention. And the conversation centered around God's love and his desire to have a personal relationship with each of us. And I just started to hear words that I had never heard before. And slowly but surely, I really started to pay attention. And just suffice to say that the invitation that was offered by that man, who was Billy Graham, seemed very enticing to me, and seemed very simple, very natural, and one that even piqued my interest. But I guess that, stubborn Irishman just decided that it wasn't the time. And let's just say the story gets picked up at a later point. But I had to go and dangle on the end of that line for about 20 years until I finally heard the message from God that would bring me to my knees.
Was that message when you were in Uganda?
Yeah, it actually was, Dr. Trin. It was, interestingly enough, the message really came home to me in Uganda, but it was an invitation a year earlier, when I was actually here in this particular same location. This is our log cabin that Michelle and I live in. That came in 2007, at early stages of going through a very tough time through the divorce, where a dear friend simply made a phone call and said, Nick, you have a choice. You're going to go through some very difficult time that you may or may not make it through. And the invitation is this: do you want to do this with or without God? And the question was so simple that I forced myself to give it an honest answer. And I happened to be on my knees at the time, and I really felt that I needed to be honest with myself for the first time. And I said, I don't want to go through this without God. And I don't want to be defeated and crushed and have nothing of me left. And being savvy enough to realize this was where my new life direction was going to be. So that invitation began my journey to spend one-on-one time with God, and to be able to start to build a muscle that I suppose we call a muscle of faith. And a year later, I'm in Uganda, totally in an environment that I know nothing about. I just happen to know that I'm by the source of the Nile. And of course, you know how biblically significant that happens to be. And I had just laid the foundation of the Ford School, which was a school dedicated to my late sister, Joan Jordan. I heard a voice of the Holy Spirit, just that little very quiet inkling that said, you need to bring them water. And it was really clear in that it wasn't education, it wasn't clothing, it wasn't anything, it was water. And that was the first time that I really felt that there was a message from God. And that did indeed start a new trajectory of life for me.
So you're in Uganda by was it river?
The River Nile.
The Nile River, and you heard the message that you need to bring them water.
Right.
Wow. How did you meet Michelle? Were you there at the same time?
Michelle hadn't quite made it. Thankfully, she was soon to appear, but she hadn't actually made it at that point. I had a little more struggle to go before God decided he's had enough struggle. I do need to send him that person that's going to really change his whole view of what love and a relationship and marriage is all about. So Michelle and I met in 2011, and I'd be more than delighted to let her fill you in on all of that. But just to finish the Uganda idea, it was where, for the first time in my life, I stopped focusing on my own self and my pain and what I thought was the worst possible outcome that could happen to anybody, losing their children, losing their financial means and wealth and estate and everything else. But seeing the poverty that existed in Uganda, walking and seeing mothers hauling water, seeing children sick with infectious diseases, seeing no available clean water, I put all that together and I realized just how very fortunate I actually was, even in my own discomfort. And that began a healing journey to realize that there are so many blessings that we don't always take for granted that I hadn't even noticed, and how much suffering goes on around us. And I think the takeaway for me was what I could actually do, just one person, what I could actually do to alleviate some of that suffering, and in the process, start to build a life of significance for myself.
Wow.
Just to answer that, it became the biggest insight, I believe, of my life up to that point, how a population of over 40 million people, that's about the same population as that of California, it could live their lives with every single waking moment dedicated to foraging for water. And then most of the time, the water that was found was surface water that I don't have to tell you carries every type of bacteria that is infectious, that perpetrates that cycle of poverty. It becomes the driver of poverty because every single day, moment, waking hour is related to finding enough water to survive. To answer the question, there's ample amounts of water. There's billions of gallons of water locked underground. And I use the word locked because it's like the people are locked in a prison cell. And that prison cell is the prison cell of poverty. And so what's lacking is the means and the compassion to be able to bring that water to the surface. So I'm trying to process all of this in the course of 2 weeks. And the only thing that I can say is that I ran the full gamut of emotions from first of all, from wondering what and why it could happen, to on the other side being so angry as to how we could call ourselves, human beings, humanitarians, not even to mention Christians, to allow this to happen. And the most shattering image for me is seeing a child close to death and just throwing my arms up in the air and saying, why, Lord, why should that child have to die just because it was born in the wrong place, in the wrong zip code, when the answer is 50 feet under that precious child's feet? There lies the answer. And yet there's nobody there to help that child. And the answer came pretty quick and pretty clear. And it said, well, what are you going to do? Forget about everybody else. What do you plan on doing about it? There was nobody else around, and there was nobody else in the conversation. And all of a sudden, I got the memo that said, well, forget about all the questions. How about coming up with a few answers? And really, before I left Uganda, before I left Kampala, I spent half a day just sitting and listening and writing out a few ideas. You know, again, I'm a farmer's son. I have plenty of know-how. You know, I know how to do a few things. At the time, I only knew that water came out of a faucet, but I can assure you in the course of weeks and months following that, I became an expert at how you could bring that water from 50 feet in the ground to the surface, how you could put something as basic and as simple as a hand pump on it, and how you could, in a moment, maybe not a moment, but within 90 days, you could actually transform life that hadn't been transformed for 100 years before. And you could do that in communication with other people. And then the work of Wells of Life started to spread its arms around schools and businesses and families and churches, and it became an inclusive gathering of people that were willing to break that 50 feet of a distance between where the water was and where the need existed. And so that's why the reach of Wells of Life became so broad and inclusive and so unifying. You obviously must have gone through something similar, Paul, because that, you know, that paints a very accurate picture. You know, just because you get excited about something and you think you've, you know, found the great way, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is going to jump up and down and say, absolutely, Nick, I got my checkbook here and I've just been waiting for you to show up so I can write a big check. And again, you know, what I've learned is that you have to really want something very badly for it to happen, to push through all of the different challenges. And I believe I wanted to help just badly enough to where I was willing to wait it out, to fail 1,000 times before the wonderful Michelle finally came along and picked me up off the ground with all the broken appendages that I think I had just received from banging my head off a lot of doors and a lot of stone walls. But yes, to your point, Paul, that was really a tough transition. You know, coming back to California, to the beautiful sunshine, to the beautiful people, to the beautiful malls, to the beautiful decadence that, you know, kind of drips off of the trees here, because I couldn't get the images that had been imprinted in my mind out of my mind. And for the most part, you know, when I closed my eyes, you know, at night, all I could see was the images of little children that were there, that would come up to you, you know, place their hand in yours. You know, they're so amazingly excited to see, you know, an Irish guy, you know, with a red nose out in the sunshine of Africa. You're probably a bit of a novelty. But seriously, I mean, that image of children suffering wouldn't leave me. And it wouldn't allow me to fit back into that very wonderful lifestyle that we have here, not just in California, but in the United States. And it was over a course of a couple of years that I had to wrestle. What was I going to do? You know, I could have comfortably made a case for just putting that all on a shelf and saying, hey, listen, you know, I've done my best. I've built 4 schools. That's more than most people. You know, I went and I took the trip and I've seen it, and now I know it's there, and maybe I'll do something about it tomorrow.
Right.
But God wasn't happy enough with that situation, and tomorrow wasn't good enough either. So the course of, I would say 2 years allowed me to get real firmly clear in my mind that this was what he wanted me to do for the rest of my life. And the challenges were going to be there. And whether I was willing to duke it out and work through them, that was a choice I had to make and a decision I had to make, which thankfully got made. And thankfully we've gotten to this point. Well, Paul, not to actually to put a full stop at the end of your sentence, but I can't actually move any further until we tell the short story of how the amazing Michelle
Yes.
showed up. And I do want to tell you that because we wouldn't be at the number I will tell you later that we are now at without this amazing woman making her appearance. So here's the short version. The bottom line was that Michelle and I both attended the same church, and neither of us really knew of the other. We probably knew each other passing in the hallway. And I was most certainly not looking to find Mrs. Jordan at that point in my life. In fact, I can jokingly say anything but. I was pretty much done with that whole section of life. But there was a fundraiser, and it happened on the 3rd of July, 2011. And that happened actually here at the property where we're living here at Spotted Bull Lane. And a lot of people from church arrived, and Wells of Life was really on its last breath. It was in need of oxygen. Maybe the oxygen is money. But anyway, we threw the gates open here. We had a simple fundraiser, and in walked a beautiful lady wearing a beautiful pair of black slacks and a polka dot shirt. Image has been indelibly placed in the minds of many people at Wells of Life. I just think God has such a great sense of humor, you know, sometimes gives us such a great memory. I just noticed that this lady, who I really hadn't and wasn't paying any attention to, was very generous. You know, she was bidding on a lot of different items, and, you know, she was ribbing people that, you know, this is actually a charity. This is not where you come to get your best deal on a pair of Gucci sunglasses. This is where you actually get to give money, which I thought was particularly humorsome and very helpful. And so that was basically where Michelle came for the first time. And, you know, she, you know, saw a few things here, and it happened to be one beautiful image, a big photograph, 4 feet by 3 feet, of a mother holding a little child, you know, to her chest. And that child was sleeping, and the mother's eyes had such suffering and joy in them at the same time. And I mean, honey, you can just let them know. I mean, what did you see in that situation that kind of had you look at a guy like me and say, I've got to help this guy?
Well, honestly, that picture occurred prior to that event. That was at church when our pastor was talking about Wells of Life, and he had that on display. And I really connected with that because I had gone through some suffering with my own children, and had, you know, God had filled up my heart with joy again. But it's like that, when those losses are occurring, the suffering doesn't go away, but the joy of God was coming through. And all I could see was the relief on this mother's face. And I really connected with that. She was so happy. And I just imagined if I had a baby like that I had to give dirty water to, that I knew might kill my child, but at the very least was going to make the child sick. I couldn't imagine having to suffer like that. And so I was really drawn to make a donation initially. And through some other work I was doing at the time, I was introduced to Nick was through our associate pastor and a good friend of mine. And he said, you know, I need you to talk to Nick Jordan because he really needs your help. And so we, you know, Nick and I was doing my own volunteer work to help families of divorce and children who were, you know, pulled away from a parent. And it was very time consuming. We were both in the real estate business. And so we crossed our paths crossed at least 3 or 4 times in different capacities, where he would, you know, maybe it was, can you help me with this real estate issue? And eventually we, when I saw the need for Wells of Life, of course, I wanted to make a donation. I didn't have a lot of money. And the same pastor invited me to attend the fundraiser. So we really hadn't connected. We knew each other in passing for about a year. And at the event, I was very drawn to his passion for this, which anybody would be. You know, I mean, I don't know very many people who would turn their nose up at the opportunity to donate to a child when you know they're going to get clean water. And it really helps when you know the people that are running the charity, that you know are actually on the ground doing the work. You have a lot more trust for where your money's going. And at the time, there was really just one part-time employee. There were no salaries being paid. And so I just wanted to help. And I knew it was hard to raise funds. I had done it before for other things. It's like no one wants to be your friend when you're a fundraiser. We've lost a lot of friends over the years. And so I went to that event, and eventually Nick asked me to join his board. And I was so busy with my other volunteer work that the joke is, I said, I will give you 1 year. I'll give you 1 year on your board, because I wanted to help him create a good board and a foundation for the charity to grow, and also give him the memo that, hey, you can't work for free your whole life. You know, charities are, yes, they're charities, but they're businesses, and the nonprofit status allows for certain things to happen, but you can't become a charity, right? You can't become the charity, then you can't take care of all these people. So we worked really hard on and I don't want to say it was just hard work, because obviously we saw the hand of God in every step that we made. It certainly wasn't something that I had projected was going to be in my future. I literally stepped aside to help. And over time, we became really good friends, and then we became boyfriend and girlfriend, and we didn't tell anyone for about a year, because just in case it didn't work out, we didn't want to muddy that mutual friendship water. But I mean, God really did. I would say he just, doors began to open. People started coming into our life, and it was really incredible. There's no way we could have done this just by ourselves, even though we're smart, we're resilient, we're resourceful, we're not afraid to ask, but there's no way that we could have grown it from what we came from to this if God hadn't have been involved all along. And were we? Well, maybe we're a little naive and trusting. We have some of that going as well. But I think we stayed focused on, what we needed to do to build the company, and God just brought the right people along. And, we had bumps along the way. It was not easy. There were many times where we felt like, do we throw in the towel, because we're trying to manage our businesses at the same time, and one has to suffer. You can't raise families and, do volunteer work and run a business without burning out. And but we stuck it out. And I would say, by the year 4, we sort of realized, if you want to continue, and if we really want to grow and do this work that we're called to do, we have to have the faith for you to stop selling real estate and just do Wells of Life. So that's stop it. And exactly. Yeah.
Right. You're really drilling down into that, but I'll promise you I'll get there. But I want to say just one little thing, and that is, if two people are not equally yoked when it comes to faith, it becomes very difficult. When the turbulent times come and the winds start to blow, and that was basically what had happened to me, and I was absolutely sure that it wasn't going to happen again, because I am an intelligent man. When it comes to failing once, I tend not to try and repeat the same mistake, even though that statistically, I'm afraid not everybody is quite there. But I learned very early on from Michelle that there was actually a pecking order that I had to slot myself into. And Michelle is a very, very pragmatic person. She's a beautiful lady, but don't cross her. Because she said, on the earliest opportunity, now, Nick, here's what's going to happen. I love the Lord. I spend morning time with the Lord before anything else happens. And that actually kind of suited me, because I'm not a morning person, because she does have a couple of hours on me on any given day. Right. So basically, she said, the Lord comes first in my life. And you actually are very fortunate, because you can get the second spot. But you need to remember that if our relationship is going to grow, and if it is ever going to get to the point of us being husband and wife, you need to deepen your faith daily. And so I got all this great coaching from this incredible woman that has the most faith that I've come across in a long time. And that's where we really could see each other going the distance. And so again, now, Paul, I won't keep you any longer. So the bottom line is this: as a result of that, relationship and having the ability to help each other and believe in each other's commitment, we have this morning, we're actually drilling well number 612. 612.
Wow.
And in addition to that, 3 years ago, we found an equally wonderful opportunity, because there's 40% of wells drilled on the continent of Africa that, for several reasons, many actually, are disused and broken after just 2 years and abandoned. So Wells of Life, yeah, as I said, one of many reasons. But Wells of Life a couple of years ago came up with a phenomenal program that we call Operation Restoration, where we completely restore a broken and abandoned well and bring it online, and it'll bring and produce the exact same net result as a brand new well will. So in addition to well number 612 being drilled, we're now repairing, rehabbing, and rejuvenating well number 115. So I guess if you're smart at the math there, Paul, you can add 612 and 115, and you're going to get 725 approximately. So 725 communities received the blessing of water in Jesus' name this morning, because we do love to give credit where credit is due. The Lord is the CEO. Might have that on my business card, but trust me, that's not anything I believe in. The Lord is the CEO, and he gets the credit for bringing clean water to 725,000 people in his name this morning and every morning. And that's the wonderful thing about a water well. You give to some charities and you get a quick result. Maybe it lasts for a minute, a second, an hour, who knows? Water in a water well donated by a Wells of Life donor is a 25-year commitment. And it's a 25-year payback, a one-time commitment, $8,000, works out at $8 per person. And you change that community for 25 years. Now, it could be longer, but just for simple purposes, we had to pick a number, because we've only had, obviously, wells being drilled for 11 years. But a well can last and should last forever with maintenance. And so I think from my old world of real estate, what an ROI, what an amazing ROI of $8 that brings water and life and hope to one person for $8. And if somebody can find a better deal than that in real estate or anything else, you know what, I got some oceanfront property out there in Arizona that I'd be willing to sell you real cheap.
So how much is it to build a well?
$8,000.
8,000. And so
sorry,
okay.
And it's $4,000 to rehab and completely repair and replace a abandoned well.
I see. Very interesting. The wells today, they're not like the wells that you normally see, like like an actual well, right? The wells today are like just pipes going down, drilled, and then for really deep.
Well,
or is it the water well where you actually
let me give you my extensive knowledge, Dr. Trin, because I am now an expert at drilling wells. So essentially, it was the Chinese that invented well drilling about 3,000 years ago with the percussion method, where they basically got a stick and they just beat the heck out of the ground. And eventually, after a long time, they got down to the water table. Now, we're much more sophisticated than that today, in the sense that we have a drilling rig that comes on site after a hydrologist has been there and basically put an X on the ground and said, X marks the spot, water's down there. And within 3 hours, maybe sometimes 5 or 6 hours, you have the most amazing sight known to man and woman when you see water gushing right out of that earth. Clean, refreshing, beautiful, probably muddy water for a while, but essentially you are correct. We then sleeve that well, we have a submersible pump that goes to the bottom of the well, and you basically put a hand pump, and it's a standardized India Mark II hand pump on top of the well. The well is sealed, you know, for basically for safety and hygiene. And around that well, you put a cement coping. And then one of the most beautiful things, you actually get to put the donor's name inscribed on a beautiful plaque at 45-degree angle, so it doesn't get washed away or worn away. And that is really what makes that a very personal gift to the community from a donor.
Beautiful. Love it. No, I love it. I love the ministry that you're in, and not only do you provide water, you know, along with that comes the word about the water of life.
Yes, it does.
Yes, the water that
That's really the biggest payback. I mean, that's really is the ultimate payback, because, you know, there's always a sequence to life, and the sequence of life as we see it and as we truly believe it, and is that everything begins with water. You know, water is life, of course, but the lack of water is the real driver of poverty, and the downstream effects of ingesting dirty water is 75% of hospitals in Africa at any one given hour of the day or night are filled with patients suffering the effects of ingesting dirty water. So can you imagine if you can fix that issue, meaning if you can take away the ingesting of dirty water by providing clean water, then you create an incredible, again, driver for health. And health, you know, is a requirement to be able to be a productive human being, for a child to be able to be awake and have their brain functioning in a school environment. And, you know, Wells of Life, we're in this for the long haul. You know, we're not here to drill a few wells. And even if, you know, we get excited about 612 wells, it's just a drop in the bucket against what's needed. And so being a businessman and having Wells of Life built on sound business principles, we started out 5 years ago building a scalable model to where we could show how you essentially solve the current world water crisis, which is the biggest single problem and the greatest single opportunity facing the world today. 1 billion people lacking water essentially is 1 in 8 people lacking water. And you have to keep spelling it out. Lacking water means ill, carrying water for a mother every single day, breaking her back, and her teenage daughter, as soon as she's capable, physically capable, walking in her footsteps down that same dirt path, walking right into another generation of brokenness, of poverty, of darkness and despair. How can we let that happen and continue to happen in a world where we can solve this one well at a time? So getting back to the scalable model, in Uganda, there's 117 districts, just like Orange County and San Diego County, etc. And so 5 years ago, we looked around, and in conjunction with one of our advisory board members, the wonderful Father Max Sekiwala, we said, what if we could take on the very worst, the very toughest, the area where there was the least access to water? And when I say least access, even for Uganda, this area had access to water for only 35% of the population. That's an easy number. There was about 1 million people in this large district. There was only 350,000 had access to water. So Wells of Life said, we're taking on that challenge, and we're going to figure out what it needs to get to the point of being able to show this as a model that can be scaled by 1, 10, 100, 1,000. And so we made a commitment of drilling 500 wells, and we gave ourselves 5 years to do that. And now I'll surprise you, Paul, and I'll give you the number and say, you know, we are closing in on those 500 wells. And we have literally, because of the generosity of our donors and foundations and families and board members, etc., we have transformed that huge area to become members of the top, I would say at the very extreme end, the top 20 out of 117 districts by simply providing water wells and learning along the way, because it's not a simple science. You have to really learn how the hydrology works and everything goes with it, including the correct equipment. We now have a business model that I would willingly give to any other NGO, 100% free, with the advice, with the knowledge, and with the know-how to come and take on another district and another district and another district until we build a synergy of compassion to where people can stand in unison and say, no child will die on my watch as long as that water is available. I will play my part. And that's the difference between a charity, an organization, and a movement. Wells of Life is a movement for change, where we bring together every person, every school, every church, every community, and every business. And each are willing to take that stand in action, not in words. We don't need any more words in the world. We've got plenty of those. We need the action that says, we will solve the world water crisis. We'll do it one well at a time, and we'll all play our part. And we will get to the point where we have a world with access to water for all of God's children.
You guys,
Well, there is no doubt about it, but there's certainly an effect from climate change. And I mean, that's quite readily apparent with, you go to look at any of the larger rivers and you simply see a smaller volume, you know, of water flowing. Reservoirs are obviously at lower levels. But, you know, that's probably a little bit beyond the pay grade of Wells of Life, in the sense that, you know, we are out in the most remote locations in Uganda where, you know, I have to say that there is no competition. There's nobody racing ahead of us to get there to drill that well. And yeah, no, so when we take our donors there, you know, we advise them, you know, you better have a good pair, you know, of work boots. Forget about your tennis shoes or forget about your Nikes or anything else. You need to have your work boots on, your sleeves rolled up, and you need to be walking to that water source that there's more than likely when you turn the corner, there'll be anywhere between 200 and 300 or 500 people waiting there patiently. And when you and your team get there, you're going to get a welcome that you won't get anywhere else on this earth than when you show up to that water well and you start to realize for the first time that you are a blessing. Because not everybody knows that they're a blessing in this world.
yes. Do you have a local office in Uganda, Waters of Life? Do you guys have offices there where folks can actually fly out and visit and walk around and see what's going on?
Oh, absolutely. You know, one of the I'm glad you brought that up, because, you know, one of the things that Wells of Life decided very early on was that we are a, what can we say, an A to Z, soup to nuts, the full spectrum of operation. So we don't sub our work out to another charity as many do in Africa, in Uganda. We have a team, first of all, in Ireland as an approved charity there. We have a main office in Kampala. We now have a staff of just between 20 and 30 wonderfully hardworking, capable individuals, where at any given day, you know, we're at some point along the spectrum of finding where the water is at to delivering the dedication of the well. So I guess the answer is yes, we have our own team on the ground, country director, deputy director, WASH officers. I haven't even had a chance to mention the fact that, you know, the great thing about an organization like Wells of Life is that we're always growing, and growth brings with it knowledge. And so we're putting knowledge to work every single day. And one of the biggest transformations in the work of Wells of Life is that we realized that providing a water well is not enough. There's a reason why 40% of wells are abandoned. And it's, you know, more than likely organizations that have good intention, but really don't have the local knowledge, the know-how, and what it takes to actually build sustainability into their water wells. So we found out a long time ago, and I kind of coined the image that the work we do is a little bit like a large iceberg floating in the ocean. You know, what you see is the piece over the water, and that's the piece which essentially represents the water well. What you don't see, and what you all know is substantially larger, is the part that it takes to sustain that water well, which is the educational knowledge of hygiene and sanitation that supports the longevity of that well. And that's where we provide what's called a WASH program. And this was no quick idea. This was a program that was developed essentially by our Vice President of Operations, Charlie Hedges, who Paul is very familiar with. And we basically decided to learn it from the ground up. How can we build a WASH program where we can impart the knowledge to the local community of the value of hygiene? Because if a well is not given proper ownership, if that community views the well as something that was delivered by a group of, you know, well-meaning, do-good people that showed up once and then left, there's a 40% chance that that well will be abandoned within 2 years. You know, we don't accept those odds. We don't work this hard and take donors' money to say, well, you know, there's a 60% chance that your well is going to work. I'm going to tell you there's a 100% chance at Wells of Life that your well is going to work and stay working. And so we instruct the local communities through education programs of the value of hygiene. And it becomes a laborious, it's a one-on-one educational model that we have now essentially perfected. And that really is the future and the next decade of Wells of Life, where we change the culture from within for communities to understand the basic components of hygiene, of sanitation. And that is what is going to bring long-lasting and sustainable change to these communities.
Wow, we have some medical students that are looking for projects, including educational projects that is connected with our Tongue Out group here. Medical students from here, right in Southern California. I would love to connect them with you. They would love to teach in some way, whether it's you know, virtually through a Zoom call to your group with translators or things of that sort, and bring health education straight from here. And second thing, I think I've seen you guys at Barnabas. Have you been in Barnabas group?
Yeah, one of the great blessings that has arrived to Wells of Life,
yes,
you know, has been the Barnabas group, and how much support has come, and how many board members and how many people that have actually traveled. So yes, Doctor, that's just one of the greatest organizations that we've been fortunate enough to come across, because once you're discovered by the Barnabas group, you know, you really get embraced by people that are people of action. You know, I told you I'm not big about the words, even though I speak a lot of them, but the action that translates into people saying, I can do this, or I can introduce Wells of Life to my company, or, you know, I can bring it to my church. And, you know, it kind of becomes like the sower. And we all know the parable of the sower in the Bible. That, you know, we're always broadcasting seed at Wells of Life. We don't always get it on the fertile ground, and it doesn't always spring up and multiply 100-fold, but we still keep sowing seed. Because the other image, again, coming from my farming years, is that, you know, when we look at communities in Uganda, we essentially see hard, barren ground that needs to be plowed, And so Wells of Life, essentially, we break that sod, we break the hard ground, we turn it over. And what we do is we play that first part that opens up the ground and makes it available to other organizations, like you just said. Now, once we have a water well available, everything is possible beyond that point. And when I say everything, I mean the beauty of microfinance added to a community that has water. Again, that becomes the driver of commerce. The opportunity that commerce brings from a community standpoint is that that's what opens the door to education. And beyond education, that's what infuses the entrepreneurial spirit that allows, you know, a transition of students to claim their opportunity to be the best that they can be. So I said earlier in the interview that we're playing a long game here. We are playing a long game because at the end of the day, there will be so many people within the communities that we have worked in that are going to be the future doctors, nurses, educators, you know, plumbers, and dare I say politicians, and, you know, there's the need for everything. But we are so fortunate that we're building hope. And without hope, there is nothing, only darkness. But with hope, there's, you know, there's the light of the world. There's the opportunity to feel God's love. There's the opportunity to know that even though we, as donors in America, may never meet some of the people that get helped, we know that we built this bridge that says, you know, when you give water to the least of mine, I tell you, you shall not lose your reward in heaven. It just becomes a simple, easy way to apply one of the most beautiful and impactful passages of Matthew's gospel, bringing the gift of life. And dare I say, the $10 million that has been raised since I founded Wells of Life on that beautiful November day back in 2007 has been returned tenfold to the donors who gave that money, because the blessing and the benefit that Michelle and I have received, and I could give you 100 stories about people that have said, I have been so blessed by the opportunity to give life, to be the hands and feet of our Lord, and to be able to show up in such a beautiful way on a mission trip where I've come back and my life has been changed to the point where I can never look at waste, excess, at more than I need again. If that transformation isn't worth 10 times the dollar you put forward to Wells of Life, then I don't know what your scale is. But mine is that if you receive more than you give, that's a ministry you want to be part of and stay close to.
Amen. We have seen that.
Michelle Jordan.
So Nick and Michelle, this is the first time I've seen Paul Roberts so quiet in our show. He's usually like, you know, you can get a word in and then, you know, Paul's talking, you can get a word in. This is the first time Paul's been so silent on our show. Wow.
Yeah, but Paul, you're the rainmaker. Come on. I mean, how many times again, sometimes people have different roles in life. Paul speaks of Wells of Life from a knowledge that he basically believes that one more introduction can be the difference between life and death. And he's always putting it out there saying, you know, take a look at Wells of Life. And, you know, that's how organizations get built. They need champions like Paul and you, Dr. Trinh. It just simply says, are you ready for an opportunity like this? Because it's your timing and God's timing. And yes. You know what? You just need to realize that when the two of those align, then you got a miracle. But you can't force God's timing. I did it for 20 years. And you know what? I ended up exhausted on the ground, you know, on my hands and knees saying, Lord, why won't you help me with these things? Why won't you open these doors? And you know what? I'm just was about egotistical enough to think that, you know, I could honestly get an answer asking questions like that. So I just back to you, Paul, you know what? Keep making the invitation, because there's somebody out there that's got a big checkbook that says, I'm now convinced I can't take it with me. I want the best possible value that I can find for my money. And I'm going to sow into Wells of Life, because that's what's going to long last and outlive me and leave a legacy of life and of hope and of sharing the gospel. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
When is your next trip to Uganda, Nick?
Our next trip to Uganda is going to be determined by, you know, the current health situation. You know, we would typically go 3 times a year,
I see.
and it simply benefited the donor more than anybody else, because work goes on. And I have to make this point in that, look, so many people, you know, pulled up the drawbridge, so many people slowed down, so many organizations kind of down tools. Wells of Life got even more efficient, effective, and aggressive in the course of the COVID years, if you want to call them that, because we decided on day one, we can sit back or we can choose to be on the front line. Well, I don't think it's going to shock any of you to know that the approach that we take at Wells of Life, we are frontline responders. And so we were designated by the government of Uganda to be frontline workers, essentially given the ability to travel freely. And so what we decided right off the bat was we would pull out the few dollars that we had kind of set in reserve, and we would buy soap, lots of soap, because you know that, first of all, it's pretty tough to have a shower without soap. You also know that the essential element from a health perspective of washing your hands cannot be overlooked. I think we must have distributed 150,000 bars of soap. And I just want you to visualize for a moment, if you will, that simple act of health and service, where we went essentially door to door, health clinic to health clinic, school to school, and provided both masks to the healthcare workers and soap to those that were in need. And I can't tell you how many thousands of lives I have no doubt that we saved by just that single act. So we have increased our drilling. We never slowed down. In fact, we took it as a personal affront that any COVID or anything that would even dare step in the way of the work that Wells of Life does. And I am so proud of the team in Uganda. I mean, they are the champions, the superheroes, the determined men and women that take the fight to poverty every day. And, you know, when you got that level of inspiration coming out of the field, you cannot help but be inspired here in California and in Ireland to do more, to work harder, to twist that arm a little bit more, to pull that checkbook out a little quicker. And dare I say, there's very few people capable of saying no when Michelle Jordan says, you know what, that child's life is in your hands, sir, madam. Are you going to write that check that brings that life, that precious life, into a place where that child can have a life? That's the level of intensity that is essential if you really want to remove any doubt that this is a world-class charity that's saving millions of people down the road.
Wow, amazing. On a show, and it just, you know, it just keeps going. Jim and Susie West says hello. I text them with your picture.
Yeah.
Two of our favorite people.
I'll
Great
connect.
donors to Wells of Life too.
I would like to connect with you guys on Facebook. I'll send you a friend's request, and let's chat some more. We're medical missionaries, so I take groups of doctors and nurses throughout the world,
Would love that.
and
We'll
so
roll
love to
out the
bring
red
you
carpet. Oh.
We're 100%.
yes. And I want to connect you with our medical students who are looking for opportunities to serve and to teach, even if it's virtually.
Of course.
Yes, yes, hygiene. So let's make those connections soon here.
Great idea.
Well,
Very
I mean, what a
excited.
blessing, because, you know, again, the collaborative effort is really where we start to just grow and grow and grow. And then, you know, just to meet somebody of your caliber, doctor, is amazing, because we've got a platform and it's yours to stand on, to engage the, you know, the younger generation that want to serve, and that, you know, in addition to, you know, bringing, you know, their medical knowledge, they want to give back. That's going, you know, give back what their skills are, and that's going to change so many communities. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, definitely. It is the wells of life, and introducing others to the water of life.
Yes.
Yes,
100%.
yes, eternal. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And Paul, will you give out our website? Because I know people will always want to reach us. So you know what it is, Paul, right?
That's
100%. Wellsoflife.org. Send a message. If you need a speaker, if you need anybody to come and give instruction, if you need the beautiful Michelle to teach some of our programs, just reach out. We would be honored and delighted and excited to be there and to share this message.
God
Thank you,
bless,
Paul.
guys.
Thank you, Dr. Trent.